No. The word was a tremor in the opulent silence of the drawing room. My father, William, stared at me, his face a mask of thunderous disbelief. I said no. I won't marry Carson. My name is Peyton, and I was, until that moment, the dutiful daughter. 22 years old, raised to be an asset, a pretty piece to be moved strategically on their chessboard. But Carson? The stories I'd heard, the glimpses I'd caught of his temper? No, not even for them. "Don't be absurd, Peyton," William finally rumbled, his voice low and dangerous. "This isn't a request. The arrangements are made. The George deal depends on this union." My mother, Veronica, glided to his side, her expression one of carefully curated disappointment. "Darling, think of the family. Think of everything we've worked for. Carson is suitable." Suitable? He was a brute, plain and simple. Suitable for whom, Mother? For the business? Because he certainly isn't suitable for me. My brother Terence leaned against the mantelpiece, a smug smile playing on his lips. He was a lawyer, sharp and utterly without sentiment. "Legally, Peyton, it's an advantageous match, and Father is within his rights to expect your cooperation." "Cooperation?" I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping me. "You mean obedience? You mean selling me off to save your precious company?" William's jaw tightened. "You are being hysterical. This is for your own good, for all our good. Steel Industries needs this alliance. Carson's family provides that. And I'm the sacrificial lamb?" My voice rose, fueled by a sudden desperate courage. "I won't do it. I'd rather be homeless." A chilling silence descended. William's eyes, cold as chips of ice, met mine. "Then perhaps that can be arranged." He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a folded document. He didn't hand it to me. He tossed it onto the polished mahogany table between us. "Terence drew this up. An eviction notice. You have until tomorrow morning to vacate this house." My breath hitched. Eviction? From my own home? I looked at Terence. His smile widened. "All perfectly legal, little sister. You're of age. You're refusing a reasonable request that impacts the family's financial stability. Grounds for disassociation." Veronica finally spoke, her voice devoid of any warmth. "You brought this on yourself, Peyton, by defying us." She turned and walked towards the hallway. "I'll have your things packed. The bare essentials, of course." "Mother!" I cried out, a shred of disbelief still clinging to me. She didn't even pause. William stood, towering over me. "You were given a choice. You made the wrong one. This house is no longer yours." The fight drained out of me, replaced by a cold, creeping dread, then a spark of something else. Fury. I watched as Veronica returned a short while later, not with suitcases, but with 2 duffel bags, meager and insultingly small. She dropped them at my feet. "These are your personal effects. The rest belongs to the family." I looked from the bags to their faces. William, implacable. Veronica, icily detached. Terence, openly triumphant. There was no love here, no family, only business, and I was a failed transaction. Wordlessly, I picked up the bags. They felt impossibly light, as if my entire life up to that point weighed nothing. I walked to the grand front door, the one I'd run through countless times as a child. My hand hesitated on the cold brass knob. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind me with a sound of utter finality. I stood on the curb, the manicured lawn stretching out before the imposing facade of the house that had been my world. The streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows. A single tear, hot and sharp, traced a path down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of sorrow, not anymore. It was rage, pure, unadulterated rage. "You'll regret this," I whispered to the closed door, to the unseeing windows. "All of you." Then I turned my back on everything I had ever known and walked into the encroaching darkness, the 2 small bags my only companions in an utterly uncertain future. The first few weeks were a blur of cold park benches, lukewarm coffee nursed for hours in greasy diners, and the gnawing ache of hunger. I learned quickly that friends were mostly acquaintances who had their own lives, their own problems. A couch here, a floor there. Each stay felt like a countdown to wearing out my welcome. My phone, my only link to any kind of help, was a prepaid burner with rapidly dwindling credit. I took any job I could find, washing dishes in a dimly lit restaurant where the cook had wandering hands. I lasted 2 days, handing out flyers for a nightclub, shivering in a too-thin jacket. The pay barely covered a hot meal. Each rejection, each small humiliation, chipped away at my pride, but stoked the embers of that rage I'd felt on the curb. They wanted me broken. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. One rainy afternoon, huddled in the doorway of a closed shop, sketching designs on a napkin, a habit from a life that felt a million miles away, a woman stopped. She was older, maybe in her late 40s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense air. "That's a good design," she said, nodding at my napkin. "You an artist?" I just shrugged, too tired and wary to engage. Just doodling. "I'm Sadie," she said, extending a hand. "I own the little craft supply shop down the street, the Gilded Thread. I could use some help, mostly stocking shelves running the till. It's not much, but it's steady." I looked at her hand, then at her face. There was no pity there, just a straightforward offer. "Peyton," I said, shaking her hand. It felt surprisingly strong. "I can stock shelves." Sadie became my lifeline. The pay was meager, but the back room had a small cot she let me use. It wasn't home, but it was safe, and it was warm. She was a shrewd businesswoman, her small shop thriving because she understood her customers and wasn't afraid of hard work. I watched her, absorbed everything. She taught me about inventory, about customer service, about balancing books. In return, I worked tirelessly, my anger and grief slowly, painstakingly, being channeled into learning, into saving every spare penny. One morning, about 6 months into my new life, Sadie was frowning at a business journal, a half-eaten muffin forgotten beside her. "Well, I'll be," she muttered, then looked up at me. "Remember that Carson fellow you mentioned once? The one your family was so keen on?" My stomach clenched. I just nodded, bracing myself. "Seems his family's empire isn't quite so golden," Sadie said, tapping an article. "George Consolidated, facing serious fraud investigations, stocks tanking, looks like they were cooking the books for years." She pushed the journal across the counter. "Your folks sure dodged a bullet there, huh? Or rather, you dodged it for them, sounds like." I stared at the headline. "George Consolidated under scrutiny. Fraud allegations mount." The article detailed shell corporations, inflated assets, a looming SEC investigation. The deal my family had been willing to ruin my life for was built on lies. They had tried to shackle me to a sinking ship, captained by a crook, all for nothing. The cruelty wasn't just heartless, it was monumentally stupid. A cold, bitter laugh welled up inside me. They hadn't been astute businessmen protecting their legacy. They'd been greedy, blind fools. That night, I couldn't sleep. The injustice of it burned hotter than ever. They had cast me out for refusing to participate in their folly, a folly that would have dragged me down with them and Carson. A few weeks later, Sadie had a problem. A local bakery, one of her regular customers for custom ribbon orders, needed a new, simple logo for their anniversary promotion, fast. Their usual designer was unavailable. "You're good with that sketching stuff, Peyton," Sadie said, more as a question than a statement. "Think you could whip something up? They're not paying much, but it's something." I spent 2 nights hunched over my sketchbook, fueled by coffee and a simmering determination. I designed a clean, elegant logo. The bakery owner loved it. He paid me $50 directly. It wasn't much, barely enough for a week's worth of decent groceries. But as I held those crumpled bills in my hand, looking at my reflection in the darkened shop window, a predatory glint I didn't recognize flickered in my eyes. "It's a start," I whispered to my reflection. a start of something they would never see coming. The $50 from the bakery logo was just the beginning. That small taste of earning something on my own terms, using my own talent, ignited a fire that burned far brighter than the initial rage. I devoured every business book Sadie had, took online courses in marketing and finance during my off hours, and slowly, meticulously, started freelancing. Graphic design, then small-scale branding, then consulting for local businesses struggling to find their footing. Years passed. 5, then 7. The cot in Sadie's back room became a small rented apartment, then a slightly larger one. The Gilded Thread was still thriving, and Sadie had become more than a mentor. She was the closest thing to family I had. My own venture, which I'd named Phoenix Designs, a nod to rising from the ashes they'd left me in, grew from a one-woman operation fueled by instant noodles and sheer grit into a respectable agency with a small, dedicated team. We specialized in ethical branding and sustainable business strategies, the very antithesis of the cutthroat, old-guard tactics William had always championed. Integrity and genuine market value, principles they would have scoffed at. Another successful quarter, Peyton, Mark, my lead strategist, said, closing his laptop during our weekly review. The green tech proposal was a huge win. They loved our transparency model. Good, I replied, my voice even. That's what we sell. Honesty. It seems to be a rare commodity. I lived simply. No flashy cars, no extravagant apartment. Every spare dollar was reinvested or saved. The fire for revenge hadn't died. It had merely banked, smoldering with a patient, cold resolve. The memory of that eviction notice, of Terrence's smirk and my mother's callous words, was a constant quiet hum beneath the surface of my daily life. I kept tabs on them. It wasn't hard. Steel Industries was a publicly discussed entity, albeit a fading one. Business journals, industry gossip, public financial records. They painted a clear picture. William's refusal to adapt, his clinging to outdated models, coupled with the fallout from the spectacularly imploded George Alliance, was crippling them. Their once proud company was bleeding money, losing market share. I'd read articles about their shrinking workforce, their desperate attempts to secure new lines of credit. There was a grim satisfaction in watching their empire, built on arrogance and disdain, begin to crumble. One afternoon, I was reviewing a new client proposal in my minimalist office when a news alert pinged on my secondary monitor. A small, almost insignificant local business brief. Steel Industries sells off subsidiary to cover operational costs. Another piece of their legacy chipped away. I felt nothing but a cold sense of observation, like a scientist watching a predictable experiment unfold. The thought, which had been a vague, shadowy desire for years, began to crystallize. The house. Their fortress of pride, the place I was cast out from. Reclaiming it wasn't just about property. It was about taking back what they had tried to destroy in me. It was about showing them that the daughter they discarded could become more powerful than they ever were. That evening, instead of going straight home, I found myself driving through familiar streets. My car, a sensible, reliable sedan, felt alien in the opulent neighborhood I once called home. I parked down the street from the house, watching it from a distance. It still looked grand, imposing, but I imagined the decay spreading within, mirroring the decay of their fortunes. The lights were on, but they seemed dimmer, less welcoming than I remembered. Or perhaps my memory was playing tricks. The pain of that day was no longer a raw wound. It had scarred over, thick and tough. Now it was a cold, hard knot of purpose in my gut. Back in my apartment, I opened my laptop. It was late, but I felt a sudden urgency. Public property records were easy enough to access if you knew where to look. I typed in the address, my fingers steady. The usual information popped up. Owner, William Steele. Assessed value, which had surprisingly dipped in recent years. Then I saw it. A line item I hadn't noticed in my previous, more cursory checks. A second mortgage. Taken out just 18 months ago. A substantial sum, far more than I would have expected. A chillingly calm expression settled on my face as I saved the document to a secure, encrypted file. "The cracks are showing," I murmured to the empty room. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would be there to widen them until the whole rotten edifice came crashing down. The discovery of the second mortgage was like finding a map to their vulnerabilities. I hired a discreet financial investigator, a referral from Sadie who specialized in corporate due diligence, under the guise of researching a potential acquisition target, which, in a way, they were. "Just background, Mr. Henderson," I'd said. "Standard practice." His reports started trickling in, painting an even bleaker picture than the public record suggested. Bad investments, leverage to the hilt, mounting debts with increasingly predatory lenders. William, it seemed, had been chasing his losses, doubling down on risky ventures in a desperate attempt to recapture past glories. And Terrence, my ambitious lawyer brother, wasn't just a passive observer. Henderson uncovered a series of shell corporations Terrence had set up, funneling what little capital Steel Industries still had into speculative, high-risk, and ultimately disastrous foreign property deals. He was trying to be the rainmaker, the savior, but he was just accelerating their demise. The sheer, breathtaking incompetence of it all was almost comical, if it hadn't been so deeply tied to my own past. One Tuesday afternoon, an unknown number flashed on my phone. I usually ignored them, but something made me answer. "Peyton? Is that you, dear?" The voice was hesitant, reedy. It took me a moment. "Aunt Yolanda?" My mother's younger sister. A timid woman I hadn't spoken to since before the eviction. She'd always been kind, in a nervous, fluttering way, but utterly incapable of standing up to William or Veronica. "Oh, thank goodness. I wasn't sure this number was still... Well," she trailed off. I heard things aren't going so well for William and Veronica." "Is that so?" I kept my voice neutral. "Yes. Well, your mother called me. Very upset. Going on about how difficult things have been ever since you left. Blaming you still for that George deal falling through, saying it was the start of all their bad luck." I almost laughed. Bad luck? Or the inevitable consequence of their own arrogance and greed? "They always did have a talent for rewriting history, Aunt Yolanda." She said William is under a lot of pressure, that Terrence is trying his best, but... Yolanda sighed, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "I just thought... I don't know what I thought. Maybe that you'd heard? Or that perhaps you could talk to them?" "Talk to them?" I repeated, my voice flat. "And what would I say, Aunt Yolanda? That they reaped what they sowed? Oh dear. No, I suppose not. It's just... they're family. They made it very clear a long time ago that I wasn't," I said, the old bitterness flaring briefly. "Thank you for your concern, Aunt Yolanda, but there's nothing I can do." I ended the call, a grim satisfaction settling in. They were still blaming me, still oblivious. It made what I was planning feel less like revenge and more like cosmic balancing. That evening, I opened a new, highly encrypted savings account. I transferred a significant sum into it, the first of many. I labeled the account with a single code name, Nemesis. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was personal. Every late night I'd worked, every sacrifice I'd made, every penny I'd saved. It was all leading to this. Weeks turned into months. Henderson's reports continued to chronicle their downward spiral. Steel Industries was a ghost of its former self. Then, the alert I'd been half expecting, half dreading with a strange, dark anticipation, finally arrived. It pinged on my laptop late one night as I was finalizing a presentation. A simple, automated newsfeed notification. Steel Industries defaults on multiple key loans. Assets at risk. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face. Assets at risk. That included the house. Their precious, prideful home. Foreclosure wasn't just a possibility anymore. It was an inevitability. A slow, grim smile touched my lips. The foundation wasn't just cracked, it was crumbling, and I was ready to push. The official foreclosure notice for the house arrived not as a dramatic announcement, but as a dry legal listing in the public notices section of the city's online gazette. I'd set up an alert specifically for that address. Seeing it there, in stark black and white, sent a shiver of profound dark satisfaction through me. Public auction, it read, followed by the date and time. The culmination of their failures, neatly summarized for anyone to see. I printed it out, the cheap paper feeling significant in my hand. I didn't pin it to a wall or anything so cliché. I simply folded it and placed it in the Nemesis file. A trophy. A few days later, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. This time, I recognized the prefix, Terrence. My heart gave a small, cold thump. I let it ring 3 times before answering, my voice deliberately calm, almost bored. Hello? Peyton? Is that really you? He sounded strained, the usual arrogance noticeably absent, replaced by a thin veneer of forced casualness. Terrence, to what do I owe the pleasure? I kept my tone light, almost mocking. A slight pause. Look, I know it's been a long time, years, but I was wondering if we could talk. Talk? I echoed. About what, Terrence? The weather? Old times? He cleared his throat. It's about a business matter. A friend of mine is in a bit of a delicate situation. Needs some discreet investors. I know you've done well for yourself. Phoenix Designs, right? Impressive. We're doing okay, I said, non-committal. The way he said impressive was laced with something I couldn't quite decipher. Surprise? Resentment? Right, okay. So this friend, he needs capital, quickly, and quietly. I thought with your connections, you might know someone. Or perhaps Phoenix Designs itself might be interested in a diversified investment. He was stumbling over his words, a far cry from the smooth-talking lawyer who'd drafted my eviction. I let the silence stretch for a moment, savoring the unspoken panic on his end of the line. Terrence, Phoenix Designs focuses on sustainable tech and ethical brands. I'm not sure a friend's delicate situation quite fits our portfolio, and my connections are generally in those sectors. I played dumb, the picture of polite disinterest. Oh, right. Of course, he said, his voice deflating. It was just a thought. Things have been challenging for a lot of people. Indeed, I agreed. The market can be unforgiving. Then, his tone shifted, becoming a little sharper, a little more like the Terrence I remembered, but with an undercurrent of something else. Suspicion? It's just, there's been a string of bad luck. Almost like someone is actively working against us. Or against people we know. You haven't heard anything, have you? Any whispers in your circles? My blood ran a little colder, but my voice remained steady. Working against you? That sounds rather paranoid, Terrence. Sometimes bad decisions just lead to bad outcomes. Basic cause and effect. He didn't reply immediately. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. Was he probing? Did he, on some level, suspect? The thought that he might, even for a second, consider me capable of orchestrating their downfall was unexpectedly gratifying. It meant he finally saw me as something other than the discarded little sister. Yeah, maybe, he finally said, his voice flat. Well, thanks for your time, Peyton. Any time, Terrence, I said, and hung up. I stared at my phone, a slow smile spreading across my face. His desperation was palpable. His veiled attempt to see if I was behind their bad luck was the icing on the cake. They still had no idea who or what they were truly up against. Immediately, I called Julio Sutton, the sharp, no-nonsense lawyer who'd handled all of Phoenix Designs' legal work for the past 5 years. He was loyal, discreet, and incredibly effective. Julio, I said once he answered. I have a new project for you, a property acquisition. It needs to be completely anonymous. Shell Corporation, blind trust, the works, and it needs to be ready to move fast. Understood, Peyton. Send me the details. I forwarded him the link to the foreclosure notice. A few days later, the official auction date for the house was announced. It was 3 weeks away. I opened my digital calendar and created an event. I typed in a single stark note: reclamation. The 3 weeks leading up to the auction passed in a blur of meticulous preparation. Julio was a maestro of legal obfuscation. He set up a shell corporation with an innocuous name, Northwood Holdings, registered in a state known for its corporate privacy laws. All funds from the Nemesis account were funneled through a series of intermediaries, making the source untraceable. Everything is in place, Peyton, Julio confirmed during our final meeting, 2 days before the auction. We were in a sterile, rented meeting room, far from my Phoenix Designs office. Northwood Holdings is pre-approved for bidding up to a figure significantly higher than the property's assessed value. No one will connect it back to you. Good, I said, feeling a strange, icy calm settle over me. The culmination of years of planning, of simmering anger and quiet determination, was finally at hand. There was no excitement, no nervousness, just a profound sense of inevitability. That evening, I found myself driving past the house again. It was dusk, and the lights inside cast a warm, almost inviting glow. A cruel irony. I parked further down the street this time, under the cover of an old oak tree. Memories, unbidden, flickered through my mind. Not just the bitterness of the eviction, but earlier ones too. Playing hide-and-seek in the sprawling garden as a small child, before William became entirely consumed by ambition, before Veronica's heart seemed to freeze over. A fleeting image of my father patiently teaching me to ride my bike on that very driveway. These ghosts of a happier past didn't deter me. If anything, they reinforced my purpose. They had destroyed that child, that family, long before they'd physically cast me out. This wasn't just about a house, it was about reclaiming a stolen future, about correcting a profound injustice. Snippets of news I'd picked up through Henderson's final, brief report, and from the general financial grapevine, indicated my family was in a state of frantic, desperate activity. They were trying to secure a private sale, to find another lender, any lender, to stave off the inevitable. Each reported failure was a small, grim victory for me. The day before the auction, Sadie called. She knew, in broad strokes, that I was planning something significant, something related to my past. I hadn't burdened her with the full, dark extent of my revenge plot, but she was perceptive. "You okay, Peyton?" she asked, her voice laced with a familiar, gentle concern. "I'm fine, Sadie. More than fine. That thing you're doing tomorrow, it's important to you, I know. Just remember what I said once. Revenge is a dish best served, but make sure it nourishes you, Peyton. Don't let it consume you." "It will nourish me, Sadie," I assured her, my voice firm. "It's the only thing that can." I knew she wouldn't fully understand the depth of the wound, the years of festering resentment. But her concern was genuine, a small warmth in the cold landscape of my resolve. The morning of the auction, I woke before dawn. I didn't go to my office. Instead, I drove to the anonymous, sleek co-working space Julio had arranged for us to use. It was miles from my usual haunts, untraceable. Julio was already there, a laptop open, a secure connection established to the online auction portal. He looked up as I entered, nodding curtly. "Ready?" he asked. I took a deep breath, the air in the room feeling cool and sterile. I sat down opposite him, my own laptop mirroring the auction site. The house. My house. Or soon to be. My emotional armor was firmly in place, impenetrable. This wasn't just revenge. This was a reckoning. A balancing of the scales. The clock on the screen ticked down the final minutes. My heart rate was steady, my hands perfectly still. All the years of struggle, the nights spent on couches, the endless work, the quiet burning anger, it had all led to this moment. The auction portal went live. A list of participating bidders, all anonymous numerical designations, appeared. Northwood Holdings was bidder number 7. "Let the bidding begin," I said, my voice even and cold, a stark contrast to the storm that had once raged within me. Now there was only ice. The bidding started slowly, almost hesitantly. The initial figure was insultingly low, barely above the outstanding mortgage. Julio, following my preset instructions, let a few other anonymous bidders nudge it upwards. I watched the numbers climb on the screen, my face impassive. Beside me, Julio was a silent, efficient machine, his fingers occasionally tapping on his keyboard as he executed my will. "Bidder number 3 increases to 1.2 million, Julio murmured, more to himself than to me, though his eyes flicked to mine for confirmation before he entered our counter. "Increase by 50,000, I said, my voice flat. The auction was being conducted entirely online, a sterile, digital affair that belied the emotional devastation it represented for one family. Though I couldn't see them, I imagined William and Terrence huddled somewhere, watching these same numbers, their faces drawn and pale. Henderson had confirmed, through a discreet source at the auction house, that a representative for the Steele interests was logged in, likely observing, perhaps even making a desperate, futile attempt to participate through a proxy they couldn't afford. The price crept up. 1.3, 1.4. A new bidder, number 9, entered aggressively, jumping the bid by 100,000. "They're getting serious," Julio commented, his tone neutral. "So are we," I replied. "Match them, and add another 50. My instructions to Julio had been clear. Don't be reckless, but don't lose. The Nemesis Fund was substantial, built over years of disciplined saving and shrewd investment. I knew, down to the dollar, what the house was truly worth in the current market, and I knew what it was worth to me. The latter figure was considerably higher. The bidding war narrowed. Bidder number 3 dropped out. Then another. Soon it was just Northwood Holdings, me, and the aggressive bidder number 9. We traded blows, each click of Julio's mouse a hammer blow to my family's dying hopes. 1.6, 1.7, 1.75. "Bidder number 9 is hesitating," Julio noted, watching the timer for their response tick down. "Push them," I said. "Increase by 75,000. A show of strength." Julio entered the bid. The screen refreshed. Northwood Holdings was the high bidder at $1,825,000. The timer for bidder number 9 started again. 10 seconds. 20, 30. "Going once," the virtual auctioneer's text flashed on screen. My breath caught, just for a second. "Going twice." The seconds stretched, each one an eternity. I could almost feel the tension radiating from wherever bidder number 9 was watching. Were they scrambling, making frantic calls, or had they finally reached their limit? "Sold!" The word exploded on the screen in bold capital letters. "Sold to bidder number 7, an undisclosed client of Northwood Holdings, for $1,825,000. A slow, triumphant smile spread across my face. It wasn't a joyful smile. Not exactly. It was colder than that, sharper. It was the smile of a predator that had finally, patiently, run its prey to ground. The house was mine. Years of pain, of humiliation, of relentless effort had culminated in this single, decisive digital transaction. "Congratulations, Peyton," Julio said, a rare hint of something almost like admiration in his voice. "The property is yours. I'll begin filing the transfer paperwork immediately. We can expedite possession." "Excellent," I said, my voice still even, though a fierce, electrifying current was coursing through me. "I want the locks changed by tomorrow morning, and I want them served notice to vacate by end of day tomorrow. Standard procedure for a new owner taking immediate possession under foreclosure terms, I believe." Julio nodded. "Stringent, but perfectly legal. I'll see to it." I stood up, feeling a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. The weight of the past, the burning injustice, it hadn't vanished, but it had transformed. It was now a source of power, of vindication. My phone buzzed a few hours later as I was driving, not towards my apartment, but in a direction I hadn't consciously chosen until that moment. It was a text from Julio. "Keys are ready. They've been served notice to vacate by end of day tomorrow, as per the new owner's stringent terms. The locks are changed. The house is secure." I was already en route. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. A fitting backdrop for the end of an era, their era, and the beginning of mine. The new keys felt heavy and cold in my hand as I stood before the familiar grand front door the next evening. It was the same door I'd walked out of a lifetime ago, but now it was mine to open. I inserted the key, the lock turning with a satisfying, solid click. The air inside was still, carrying the faint, lingering scent of their lives. Veronica's expensive perfume, William's cigars, the lemon polish the housekeeper always used. Alien, yet disturbingly familiar. I walked through the silent rooms, my footsteps echoing on the marble floors. The furniture was still theirs, shrouded in the dim evening light filtering through the large windows. It felt like walking through a museum of my own past, a past I was about to decisively overwrite. Headlights swept across the driveway. They were here. The bank, as per Julio's carefully worded instructions, had informed them the new owner wished to speak with them regarding any personal effects they hadn't yet removed. A courtesy, designed to ensure this confrontation. I stood in the center of the cavernous drawing room, the very room where my life had been irrevocably altered. The door opened. William entered first, his face a mask of weary indignation. Veronica followed, her usual icy composure looking brittle. Terrence trailed behind them, his eyes darting around, already sensing something was amiss. Then they saw me. William stopped dead, his jaw dropping. "Peyton, what in God's name are you doing here?" he sputtered, his voice thick with disbelief and dawning rage. Veronica gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her face turning a deathly pale. Her carefully constructed facade finally, spectacularly, shattered. Terrence just stared, his lawyer's mind visibly scrambling, a dawning horror mixed with a grudging, horrified understanding beginning to flicker in his eyes. "Hello, Father," I said, my voice calm, collected, resonating with a power they had never acknowledged in me. "Mother, Terrence." "How did you get in here?" William demanded, taking a step forward. "This is still our—" "Actually," I interrupted, my tone mild, "it isn't." I let that sink in. "You told me this house was no longer mine, Father, all those years ago. You were right. For a time, it wasn't." I paused, my gaze sweeping around the opulent room. "But things change." I looked directly at Veronica. "You said I brought my fate upon myself, Mother." "Indeed. I learned to be resourceful." Then my eyes settled on Terrence. "And you, Terrence, always so quick with the legalities, the fine print. You'll appreciate this, I think. Everything that has transpired is perfectly legal." A beat of silence, thick with their shock and dawning comprehension. "I am the new owner," I stated simply, letting the words hang in the air. "Northwood Holdings, the company that purchased this house at auction, that's me." William's face contorted. "You? You did this? How could you?" "How could I?" I echoed, a humorless smile touching my lips. "After you threw me out with nothing but the clothes on my back and 2 duffel bags? After you tried to marry me off to an abuser to save a failing business deal? I think the better question is, how could I not?" Veronica finally found her voice, a pathetic, quavering whimper. "Peyton, darling, surely we can discuss this. There must be some misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding, Mother," I said, my voice hardening. "The bank gave you notice. The terms were clear. I expect you to be gone. This house is mine now." William started to bluster, something about legal recourse, about fighting this. Terrence, however, just watched me, a strange, almost defeated expression on his face. He knew. He knew the legalities would be ironclad. I had learned from the best, after all. Him. Julio, who had been waiting discreetly in the foyer as per my instruction, stepped forward at that moment, holding a file. "Mr. Steele," he said, his voice professional and firm, "all paperwork is in order. Any attempt to contest this will be fruitless. The new owner is taking immediate possession." They looked broken, humiliated, stripped bare of their pride and arrogance. Veronica began to weep. Not the elegant, controlled tears I remembered, but ragged, ugly sobs. William just stared, his face ashen. I watched them gather the few remaining boxes they'd hastily packed, their movements clumsy, defeated. There was no triumph in their tears, no joy in their despair. Just a profound, cold satisfaction. The scales were balanced. They departed without another word, 3 diminished figures disappearing into the night, their legacy in ruins, their power over me gone forever. I walked through the empty rooms, the silence now truly mine. The fire of revenge, which had burned so steadily for so long, had finally consumed its fuel. It left behind not ashes, but a landscape transformed. I was powerful, in control, forever changed, yes, but vindicated. Standing in the master bedroom, the one that had been theirs, I looked out the large window at the sprawling estate, the city lights twinkling in the distance. A faint, chilling smile touched my lips. I had taken back more than a house. I had reclaimed my power. I had authored their consequence. This fight, this journey, had forged me, and I embraced the woman I had become.